CRPN Central, this is Dr. Fox. Thank you for your continued support of the CRPN mission and CRPN Central. If you like this free education, please subscribe to the CRPN Central YouTube channel today and follow us on LinkedIn. If you'd like to join CRPN as a site or a sponsor, contact us today at info@crpaynet.com. Enjoy the show. Don't forget to share your voice for good and positive change in the industry.
Overall, the budget looks okay, but I'm kind of worried about this archiving fee. $1,500 doesn't seem like a lot to hold onto study records for nearly 30 years.
I'm sorry, but that is firm. That's as high as I can go without sponsor approval.
Well, the ops team is in a bit of a hurry, and we have patients waiting. Well, let's go ahead and approve it. In 30 years, it won't be my problem anyway.
5 years later.
Looks like that's the last of the documents. I can't believe it's already been 2 years since we closed this trial. Are you sure we have to put all of these documents into long-term document storage?
Oh, absolutely. You never know when they will need to confirm the parking voucher for our trial participant, or it could be that critical restaurant receipt to celebrate the closeout visit many years ago. Besides, in 25 years, it's not going to be my problem anyway. Let's call the storage company, shall we, to pick up these boxes?
25 years later.
Study boxes retrieved. Origin 2024. Contents. Study source. Regulatory filings. Contract. Blank pages. Unknown food consumption documents. Recruitment flyer. Birthday invitation. Wedding announcement. Okay. I get it, Reg 5. Jeez, what were they thinking back then? I feel like I've inherited years of problems. There is no way we should have had to store so many pointless things for so long. I'd have to go to a museum to access a USB drive. And look at this contract. The site was paid just $1,500. $2024. Talk about upside down. Financial and regulatory logic irrational. FDA decision validated. Sponsor contacted. Destruction authorized. Proceed. Well, the study helped a lot of people. And the data helped our world advance. But it's time to say goodbye, old friend. Yes, Reg 5, proceed to destruction. Destruction confirmed.
Archiving and document storage, an activity that is critical to protecting the data of this industry, and yet one that is so underfunded, overlooked, and misplanned that it risks putting years of patient sacrifice in harm's way. We document and report source as our primary objectives to help regulatory authorities make critical decisions about therapeutic approvals. And yet, the payments for document storage for so many years couldn't even buy monthly subscriptions for chewing gum, much less hundreds of months of adequately protecting the sole purpose we are in this industry. Sponsors, budgets are tight, and financial responsibility keeps you afloat. But please, don't underestimate the costs and efforts it takes for sites to preserve the data that you've invested so much into. Work with your sites and make sure they have what they need to provide you with the quality that your trial deserves. Sites. Agreeing to a couple $1,000s at the beginning of a trial will almost never be financially responsible compared to the work and resources that you will need post-closeout. Be conscious of your legal and regulatory responsibilities and the costs that they incur, because no matter where you are in the study lifecycle, what you record, file, and store really is everyone's problem. Welcome to CRPN Central, the official podcast of the Clinical Research Payment Network. I'm your host, Dr. Daniel Fox. CRPN Central discusses the real issues with our clinical research industry to explore and identify mutually beneficial solutions for all of our stakeholders. Without our data, we wouldn't have results. And without results, our regulatory agencies wouldn't have what they need to make life-saving decisions or approvals. Still, as important as data and integrity are in our industry, we continue to take long-term document storage and archiving, its responsibilities, and its efforts for granted in our negotiations and our budgets. In an industry with growing demand and hunger for more and more data, how may we enhance record retention for improved trial quality and overall results? Today, we will discuss document storage and archiving, or record retention, in clinical research, defined by 21 CFR 312.62, Section C, as the amount of time an investigator shall retain and maintain records for a period of 2 years following the date a marketing application is approved for the drug for the indication for which it is being investigated, or if no application is to be filed, or if the application is not approved for such indication until 2 years after the investigation is discontinued and FDA is notified. First, we will speak with an experienced site administrator who has managed and overseen record retention in clinical research. Then, we will speak with an industry pro who has managed record retention and is now helping sites across the industry with compliant best practices. To maintain valid comparisons, both interviews will use the same questions, and my guests did not know the questions before the interviews. We will reconvene after the interviews, compare answers, and perhaps identify ways that we as clinical research professionals may optimize record retention for secure and compliant trial performance. Our first guest is an experienced leader in our industry's front lines. Anna Fehr is a certified clinical research coordinator, a registered nurse, and the co-CEO at One of a Kind, or One Oak, Clinical Research Center. Combined with over 15 years of experience in research, Anna brings quality, integrity, and efficiency to One Oak, and I am so thankful she's taken the time to speak with us today. Please welcome with me, Miss Anna Fehr. Anna Fehr, thank you so much for coming on to CRPN Central.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Fox. Glad to be here.
Would you be willing to introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Anna Fehr. I'm a co-owner of a clinical research site called One of a Kind Clinical Research Center. We're housed here in Scottsdale, Arizona. We have a second location in Napa, California. My co-CEO is Alexandria Clark, and the two of us together, we uplift private practice physicians and introduce them to research and train them on how to be a good PI.
Speaking my language right there, I love what you do. And I believe the acronym is OAK, right?
Right, One Oak. It's so much easier than saying One of a Kind Clinical Research Center.
One Oak. So how old is One of a Kind?
Yeah, so we started towards the end there of COVID in 2021. We're at 2024. We just hit our 3-year mark over the weekend. We have 6 PIs right now that are actively enrolling in clinical trials, 3 full-time coordinators, research assistant, regulatory department, budgets and contract folks. We're on our way. We're still in our growing phase, but we're having a good time and everybody's enjoying what they do, and we're a fun little company.
That sounds amazing. And I could only imagine all of those patients that you can now bring research to because you're empowering PIs. What a great story.
That's the best part, is what you just said. We are literally empowering PIs. We are bringing them into a new world that they always wanted to be a part of but had no way to get there, and then to give their patients the access to opportunities that they've never had the option of doing before. It's life-changing.
Amazing. Today's topic is record retention. What experience do you have in record retention?
Just from being a coordinator and ending the study at closeout, keeping it on site for X amount of years, and then getting it prepped and ready to ship off site. Really, truly hands-on, all the way from back in 2003 of paper record retention. And then even at one of the sites I used to work for, we went back to go through their document storage from trials going back to the 1970s.
Wow.
And trying to get permission to destroy some of those records. And let me tell you, that was not a pretty sight to see.
I've been there, done that. It is not pretty. That's been a huge challenge that I've had as well. Anyone who has had the quote opportunity, I won't say it's a privilege, to go through old records and try to make those decisions and try to contact people legally to get those records destroyed. That's right. Things do have to be destroyed. They can't live forever. It's crazy. I'm going to ask you a series of questions today, and I'm going to ask those questions to another individual in the industry. They're the same questions,
Okay.
and we're going to compare what you have to say to the answers of the other individual. And then after we have this podcast and after it's released, we're going to have a live event with the community about record retention, archiving, doc storage, and how we as an industry might be able to improve it for better quality.
That sounds like so much fun. I'm so excited.
Record retention is fun.
I know, I'm such a nerd.
How do you define document storage, archiving, and record retention?
So that's to what I'm obligated to. ICH, GCP, FDA guidelines state that I have to hang on to records for 2 years up until when they submit for the new drug application or that it's been approved. And then after that, it's however long I'm contracted with the sponsor. That means it's a negotiation between me and the sponsor at that point. I define it on how long and then what it is that I'm storing. It's all the essential documents, all of our source records, paper or electronic, all of our regulatory records, paper or electronic, and then anything that was left behind.
Let's have a little fun here. What's the most extreme document storage provision you've seen in a CTA?
25 years. That's my average right now. I haven't seen over 25 years.
I actually have one of the CTAs that I negotiated. Well, I didn't negotiate it. What happened is I inherited it. The site actually agreed to the L word, lifetime.
What?
Yeah. Back in the day,
Whose lifetime? The PI's lifetime?
the site will hold on to these records for the lifetime of the site.
Whoa.
That's a tricky one. It's like, well, so much for that one.
That's
But now they
sneaky.
got a 100-year-old box of papers. The site's going to have to pay for it. So it's a range. I see at the very minimum, the definition that you had 2 years after FDA decision. Most standards will say 15 years just to be safe.
Right.
And then, of course, I have seen some 25s and even a 30. And then, of course, I saw one lifetime. On top of that, there's all other provisions, such as sometimes in a CTA, you're going to have something that says the site must contact the sponsor prior to destruction. You're going into that giant black hole where 25 years from now, is the sponsor going to be around? Was the sponsor acquired? Normally, small pharmaceutical companies are bought by large pharmaceutical companies. So now you have to deal with other companies that didn't even sign the contract you agreed to in the first place. 25 years later, odds are the document storage that you're trying to clean up was probably contracted or negotiated by another personnel member. It's very, very hairy.
It is.
It is literally the long-term storage obligations of a site to maintain safe and secure physical source of the trial or electronic source.
That, if needed, we can replicate the study.
Exactly. Let's say the drug hit the market and something happened among the masses. And the FDA is saying, oh man, I wonder if this was in the trial when we tested it. We're going to have to go back to the sites and we're going to have to say, hey, we need to look at these data. We're seeing a trend. We're seeing something happening. We need to understand what happened in the trial. Sites are going to have to retrieve that.
Right. And it is ridiculous for sites to think that that's not going to happen because it does happen. And you're jinxing yourself already by just thinking that it's not going to happen to you. So you better set yourself up in a way that you can replicate the study however you store the study.
It has to be retrievable. Most of the sites, the standard policy is it'll stick around on site for 2 years. And then after 2 years, then they can ship it off to the long-term Iron Mountain storages of the world. That costs money, right?
It costs money to store it and it costs money to retrieve the boxes. You also are required to have a list or some kind of a plan to know which boxes with which study and that you know which boxes that you can take on, which is something that they did not really do back in the 70s.
No, they didn't. You and I went through a very similar exercise. Very old site, old school. They didn't really categorize their boxes very well. Now we had to literally go through and catalog old documents.
Fun facts, back in the earlier days, there may not have been information that showed you site numbers. They were just the PI's name, protocol numbers, IRB numbers. That information wasn't readily available because nobody thought that they may have needed it.
Or back in the 70s and 80s, it was, oh, just throw everything in a box, store everything. No questions asked. We just want to be safe. Throw it doesn't matter. We're going to have all this stuff in a box, even if it's not sourced, even if it's not relevant. So now you are literally paying for long-term storage on things that you don't even have an obligation to store.
I totally forgot about this, but yes, there was receipts from the CTA about proof of things that they had to invoice for.
Yeah.
Those payments were paid. It's not having to prove to the FDA to repeat the study for payments of paid. Oh man, that was rough to go through.
Don't forget every single invoice, every single remittance. Let's remember on a contractual level in IWO, generally what'll happen, even back in the 90s, it was After 60 days, 180 days after your site has closed out, all financial obligations are fully remitted. It's the point of no return.
Yep.
There's no point in putting that in your archive. That has nothing to do with what the FDA is interested in.
Exactly. They want the study data facts. They don't want that.
It's a mess. And for anyone who just says, even now in the electronic age, if they say, oh, we're just going to save everything, take a lesson from healthcare. Anyone who works in healthcare will tell you that you can't just save everything, and you do have to make decisions to eventually destroy data. That is coming in this industry. And so we should probably take some lessons now so we can be a little more efficient in what we do.
I couldn't agree more.
Could you walk me through the document storage process through the trial's life cycle?
For us at our site now, everything's electronic. We still have paper backup for a couple of things. What are normal reg binders, how they used to be like 3 or 4 reg binders a study. Now you're looking at maybe a 1-inch binder. As far as paper source goes, there's very rare that we have anything that's paper source anymore besides our consent form. You're looking at like a 1/2-inch binder for a 3-year study. Very small paper things. The CTA, that's all electronic. Our budget, our contract, the CDA, our feasibility, everything from startup, that's in one electronic folder. Throughout the time of the study, after startup, after SIV, that's all collected electronically for us as well, for regulatory and for source. And then closeout. There's nothing that would be paper wet ink signature for closeout visits. Maybe we don't really do this anymore either, but the CRA visit log, those are all electronic too. It's all stored on our eReg eSource platform at the closeout visit. We hang on to it for a year and leave it open for a year because, everything like trickles in afterwards. You'll get random letters here or there, newsletters, whatever. You still need access to it.
Do you ever have the situations where the sponsor sends you a CD or a USB drive or some kind of a physical digital media to put with your doc storage for the trial?
Ooh, yeah. For EDC, we get it 3 ways. We'll get it as a CD, which none of our computers have a CD player or a CD burner anymore. So that's already obsoleted tech for us. Or we'll get it on a flash drive that's password protected, but you won't get the password. You'll get some kind of obscured email that is password protected for a password. Usually doesn't end up working out for us very well.
Yeah.
Or you'll get a large file via email, and you'll have to download it to your computer to put it on your own system, whether it's a USB or an external hard drive. Once we've archived it in there, it's archived to the cloud, and that we'll always have access to for as long as that system is viable. And then we have our own backup system that we use right now, which is external hard drives.
And they're all validated and they're password protected.
Validated, password protected. If you're storing this data for 25 years, who's responsible for hanging on to the password protected sheet that shows you all the passwords for each one of these data storage things? Well, obviously the One Oak owners, Alexandria and myself, and I would hope that we're around. I literally put it in our wills where this sheet is located and how to get to it. So in case I die, my beneficiary knows where this information is.
That is commitment right there, Anna. Just like you were working with the 70s documents with the frail floppy drives, who knows what's going to happen with physical media in 25 years.
Right. Degradation is real and obsolete data is real.
Oh, and then when does document storage start?
After the first year from closeout is when we finally put the official electronic archiving on our eSource eReg systems. It doesn't mean that it moves offsite or anything. It's only readable data now. And then it hangs out here at our site for the 2 years. Here's the tricky part. If our contract states that the 2 years starts when the new drug application is approved or declined by the FDA, nobody tells me when it was submitted or approved or declined. I'll be lucky if I see a commercial and I'm like, I know that drug. I did that drug 5-6 years ago. And hopefully that's a trigger to me like, I think it's time to move this offsite.
That's something we ran into, but every year we go to clinicaltrials.gov and look for that date because it is published.
Oh, there you go.
When you do budget negotiations, it's a 50-50 split. Almost every single time when you negotiate archiving and document storage fees, it's always payable upon site closeout. 50% of the sites out there hold a stance and say, we start doc storage at the time that we put that first file in after we are activated. So as a result, two things could happen. One is you can negotiate it so that you receive your document storage at signing of CTA or at site activation, not at closeout. The other thing it does is it extends the time of effort for your document storage, which allows you to justify for higher value rates. What is the highest value you've ever successfully negotiated a document storage amount?
For electronic doc storage, about $3,500 for 15 years.
Starting at closeout?
We have a fun little fee that we've been able to get approved most of the time, where it's regulatory submission and regulatory document storage, and that's a yearly cost.
Like a shelf rental?
Like a shelf rental. Because sometimes they'll allow equipment space, IP space, especially if you have a huge randomized trial and huge wallets. We can justify it that way.
Build it into a regulatory fee as well. They'll make it part of your annual regulatory.
That's what we end up doing, is building it into the regulatory side, because it usually gets approved without a lot of explanation.
If you can quantify the number of months of obligation starting at signing of CTA and going into your 15, 20, 25 years, you're going to have approximately somewhere between 17 and 30 years of obligation. And if you charge by the month, oftentimes you can get document storage ranging between $8,000 to $18,000.
Dang.
Yeah, so got to be real careful with that, but you have to justify it. Of course, the CRO who's negotiating with you, they're going to have this bell curve and everyone's going to agree to a $3,000 rate. This is way more than anyone's ever accepting. And you're saying, yeah, but they're not asking enough. Here's why. Here's all of the different work that we have to do. And 50% of the time, not only are sites getting paid for document storage at signing of CTA instead of closeout, but also they're getting that range, much, much higher rates, because they are applying value to document storage. What are the challenges of our current record retention practices?
The one that gets me the most, that keeps me up at night, is that USBs and hard drives, the only thing that I've got going for me right now, isn't supposed to work after 3 to 5 years. Their warranty expires after that time. And am I supposed to be the one that goes into Iron Mountain, collects my USBs and my hard drives and puts them on a new USB or hard drive, or transfers that data over to a new system and check on this consistently? I'm not getting paid for it, for one. I've yet to figure out any sponsor that will have this negotiation with me about it. I just don't see how we're supposed to keep up with this demand and afford it.
Record retention is the largest unfunded mandate in the industry.
Absolutely.
Anyone who negotiates a budget, they need to find that rare event where sites actually having to truly manage their record retention to understand the sheer amount of work that it takes to do this for 25 years. It's multiple staff personnel, it's multiple training, it's passing this torch on from one generation of professionals to the other, and it is dang expensive.
Absolutely.
Follow-up question. It's all a CTA provision. Generally, what it'll say is the site will not destroy records without getting prior written approval from the sponsor. And then the next statement says, in the event that the sponsor wants to retain these records for longer, then the sponsor will pay for additional storage time, or the sponsor will take ownership of the records. Let's say that 15 years later and you're ready to destroy, and you send a message to the sponsor and they come back and say, no, we want you to hold on to that longer. Have you ever successfully gotten a sponsor to pay you 15 years later for additional storage?
No, never.
So they'll put it in the CTA, but they don't really have a path to do that.
That's the problem. The protocol is closed. The invoicing system for that study is gone. They have no way to do it. What ends up happening to us is we get ignored.
Yeah, the sites are ignored when the sites are holding onto a bag that they have to pay to store, but they're not allowed to destroy. How may we improve record retention and archiving in clinical research?
I think we have to first start with getting the sites together and understanding that they don't just have to say yes. They don't have to just be thankful for the hand that feeds, and to let them know that they do have a voice. And if we all can come together in some new terms and new understandings of what our obligations are.
We as sites need to kind of agree on some standards that we can allow in CTAs for something like this. The person on the other side of that negotiation negotiation table for the CTA, they're not going to care about this. They're not going to be a stakeholder. They don't have skin in the game. They're going to do their job and move on to the next contract. And in 25 years, they're probably going to be somewhere different. We need to have a kind of a standard for record retention. As an industry, we have 21 CFR. We have CTAs that are all over the place. But as sites, we need to have a standard.
We need to have a standard, and as time goes on and technology changes, we have to be able and be willing to adapt to it. Being on a cloud storage system already, we're walking that fine line. But as soon as our e-system is bought, sold, or goes bankrupt, God forbid, I'm going to have to jump and be ready. Staying one step ahead of the game. It's not all just about patient safety, the next study, the next new thing. It's also about running a business and making sure that you're holding up your end.
When you negotiate this contract at site startup, it's hurry up, get the contract done. We have patients waiting. We want to get this started. We need our startup invoice. There's everything on a site administrator's mind except for record retention. That's the last thing that they're worried about.
That's right.
It's 30 years down the road. We can't guarantee we're going to have any record retention because we haven't enrolled patients yet.
Right. Or what will happen to you? My site will be inherited by somebody else. I'll sell this off to somebody else. It'll be somebody else's problem.
And I've heard that too. We're not worried about this. We're on an exit strategy. It's 25 years. It's not going to be my problem. So go ahead and take whatever you want for doc storage. Document storage is kind of like planting a tree. An oak. The tree that you plant isn't for you. It's for future generations.
That's a perfect analogy. It really is. The work that we do today is to help everybody else in our world for tomorrow, eventually. Slow growing, but it'll get there.
If I were to give you the microphone right now and I said, what would you like to tell the entire industry about record retention, document storage, archiving, and how we can make it better, what would you tell them?
I would tell them this is a negotiation. This is not a stonewalling situation, that sites do have the power. As the years have gone on here, FDA guidelines, ICH GCP, they're adapting and changing and giving investigators and sites more power and more support. We've always had it. We just didn't all come together. We've always been separated. We've always been, don't share your information, don't share your stories, hush, hush. No, it's all about collaboration. It's all about working together. It's all about a power in our own voices here and sticking together. The independent site, the independent PI, it's trickles down to being available for the patients, and we can't let things like this get in our way from doing what we're supposed to be doing here.
I use a hashtag. I don't know if anyone used it before me, but it's a hashtag that says sites have rights.
I love this.
A little secret for any of the SOS fans out there, that was my vote for the name of the conference.
Sites have rights.
Sites have rights. They really do. And document storage, record retention are some of them. We as sites need to talk with each other. We need to share our stories. We need to follow CRPN Central because that's the exact mission. We need to understand our rights, and we need to be able to exercise them in a global industry that is designed to try to optimize their profits at the cost of site efforts.
I agree.
Anna, thank you so much for coming on to CRPN Central. An amazing conversation. I can't wait to talk about record retention at the live event. I really appreciate you coming on today.
Oh, thanks so much, Dr. Fox. This has been a pleasure.
I'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye. Our next guest has over a decade of experience growing successful and productive sites, from pre-award to closeout visits and beyond. Nicole Holguin is the co-founder and director of operations at Cornerstone Clinical Research Services. Combined with her extensive experience, Nicole ensures Cornerstone brings comprehensive service offerings to its clients for quality and compliant trial performance. Nicole is an amazing voice in this industry, and I'm so thankful she's taken the time to speak with us today. Please welcome with me Miss Nicole Holguin. Nicole Holguin, thank you so much for coming on to CRPN Central today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Would you be willing to introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. I'm Nicole Holguin. I am the co-founder of Cornerstone Clinical Research Services. Over the years, I've worn many hats in the clinical research space, working directly at sites in various roles to leading teams. I started this company earlier this year with a like-minded colleague of mine, and we're here to help bridge the operational gaps for sites.
What do you offer to sites?
We offer all different operational services, things that will help the site bridge those gaps to be able to execute their trials. Sometimes it's recruitment. It can be filling those boots on the ground. They might have a coordinator need that they need help right now while they're trying to hire, but they don't have time. We can even help them hire and train. Training Training on site is probably one of our biggest services, along with quality checks. You might have an upcoming audit. We will help you come in and relook at all of your quality checks and make sure that you feel supported. Also SOPs, and that's been a huge service for our clients recently. We work with the site on what their needs are, and then we make a package based on that for them.
It is absolutely critical to have a strong foundation as a site to do your work. And the cornerstone when it comes to building is always the most important point of foundation. It holds all of the stress. As cornerstone services, you are literally helping sites to build a strong foundation so that they can succeed.
That's exactly right. A lot of these sites are only missing one or two corners. They just need a little bit of help. And we work with sites that don't have any corners, that are starting from the ground up.
Have you ever had to deal with archiving or document storage of clinical research trials?
More than I would like. It's a necessary evil of clinical research.
Today's topic is document storage and archiving. It's a fun and exciting topic all about storing a bunch of information for a very long time. I'm going to ask you a series of questions today, and I've already asked these to another professional. Now, you don't know these questions yet, do you?
No.
And neither did the other professional. We are going to get your answers and we'll compare it to the other professionals. And we're going to see if we can't align on maybe some best practices, maybe some things to think about when it comes to document storage and archiving in clinical research.
Sounds good.
How do you define document storage and archiving in the clinical research industry?
Document storage is literally storing your study documents post-study completion. It's usually a little bit different in each contract, but typically you're storing these documents on site for a couple of years. And then after that couple of years, you're calling a long-term storage facility to typically usually pick them up and store them for years. And you're doing this because it's not only FDA regulation, ICH regulations, it's also in your contract with the sponsor. And I would encourage every site to know what that is for each of their contracts. You're doing this because this investigational product has not hit the market yet. These documents need to be stored and retained and retrievable. There's many ways of doing that now. Over the years, paper has been king, but I don't think that's the case anymore. And I would encourage every site to be thinking about this differently. It takes up space when you're using paper, and it takes up time to retrieve these when a sponsor needs them. And let me tell you, in my years, sponsors have called back years later needing some form of document. Specifically, I remember at one time, 2 or 3 years after a trial, they contacted me for a certain page number for a temperature log. It was the most random request, and I had to retrieve that document. That's part of our contractual agreement to be able to retrieve that when needed. It's a necessary evil, but there are much better ways now than there have been in the past.
And we're improving. You said something that was really interesting to me. Make sure as a site that you look in your contract on what your storage obligations are. From your experience, how many times have you seen sites who are negotiating their budgets for trials refer to the contract for document storage to understand how much they need to pay for the required document storage?
Sadly, I don't think they contemplate that at all. I think they should be 100%. I think they're just taking it as they can get it for that contract and storing the documents, but they're not thinking about what it's costing. The sites that I've worked with have not gone that deep in to figure out what they actually need to cover that.
It's on an external level too. Whenever I bring it to the attention of the contract negotiator that I'm working with, here's section 5A, archiving and doc storage of the CTA. Here's the requirements that we have to have according to contract. And to do that, here's how much it's going to cost to do it. And by the way, here's an Iron Mountain quote to meet the expectations of the CTA. The CRO budget negotiator looks at me like, nerd. I don't think they expect sites to actually do their homework about doc storage for cost.
Yeah, because honestly, Dr. Fox, I don't think many do. Sites should be more proactive about that kind of stuff during budgeting.
Could you walk me through the document storage process through a trial's life cycle?
If we're talking document storage from the beginning of the trial,
maybe that's a question. In your mind, when does document storage start?
In the beginning. The second you have a document.
So as soon as you re-hole punch something or save it to a computer, document document storage starts.
Yeah, because here's the thing. You have to maintain those documents and you're responsible for them the second they're created. You need to make sure that they're housed in a secure location within your site. They're retrievable for your monitors, yourself, your PI, everything. They need to be organized. And this makes it so much easier when it comes post-trial. But during the trial, that's the most important time. Honestly, it's critical. If you lose a source page at that point in time, it is not recreatable. You are not following CalCOA. You are not adhering to the protocol. It's huge. You're storing and maintaining these documents throughout the entire trial. And as we know, trials can be 6 months, trials can be 6 years. It's really important that you also have SOPs that line out how you organize your documents during the life of the trial. And then once you go through, you're managing it well, you're organized, everything is in its place come the end of the trial. Now you've done your closeout visit and you can take all of these binders, folders, whatever you have, and you can sort of, I call it quarantine. I would put them in boxes and find a secure location where we can store them until we can call long-term storage. And this is the biggest challenge for sites, especially smaller independent sites. They run out of room. It can be a lot of documents. It's a different process if it's electronic. But after the 2 years, you would call long-term storage, and you have to be organized about that as well. No matter what vendor you're using, keep that organized. Know who has access. Know your access codes. Know what they have on site. Have a very good inventory. They usually give you a log to complete. Make sure it's as detailed as possible. Don't just put study A. Put study A regulatory binders A through B, because when you need to retrieve it, you are not going to want to retrieve all 100 boxes that are there and go through them all. You want to be able to look in your binder and say, oh my gosh, I need page 4 of that temp log on study ABC. That's right here. I open up my binder to the long-term storage. I call long-term storage. I need box FGF. I need it as soon as possible. Then you get that back. You get the document you need, scan it, and then again, you call long-term storage to re-retrieve it. It's definitely a process with paper.
And if I'm not mistaken, every time you call the long-term document storage facility and make these requests, and so they'll go in and they'll pull it and they'll deliver it to you and they'll take it back, that costs a lot of money.
Sure does. That's another hit to the site.
So it's another reason to stay super organized. That way you're not pulling the wrong things.
Exactly. And timing. Of course, when a sponsor requests something like this, they want it yesterday. You're a site that's working, but time lapses, and we all know we're getting busy. So you put in your request to Iron Mountain and you're not getting that document for a few days. You're on to another patient. You're on to another thing. It's just very inconvenient for the site and the coordinators.
What needs to be stored long term?
So all of your patient source documents, anything that is documenting your patient's life cycle on the trial, from screening, your informed consent form, all the way to their last end of study visit, end of treatment visit, all of their source documents, as well as your regulatory binders, ISF, sometimes called your investigator site file. This needs to be maintained. Those are typically those giant 4 or 5 inch binders, and you usually have a few of them, and they grow during the trial. So all of that needs to be maintained too. One tip I did have about paper storage, we used to take everything out of the binders, and then not only can we now reuse that binder for other studies, but then we would get those metal rings, and they're 3 or 4 inches in diameter. They pop open, and you almost kind of create your own 3-ring binder without the cover and the back. That created a lot of space, over 25 binders. If you are stuck in the storage loop of paper, I would recommend at least introducing some small tips like that to help it.
Consolidate, you get rid of a lot of space. Binders do take up space. They're really good to organize, but they take up a lot of space.
And they're expensive too.
Yes, they are. Anything physical media in an office supply store, it's very expensive, especially if you multiply it by hundreds of binders, hundreds of boxes of paper. Storage counts.
Think about why you're storing it. Think about the whole purpose of it, to be retrievable for data points. Holistically, if we all just kind of sat down and said, why are we storing things? What really truly is meaningful to store? I think we could cut that down tremendously.
We ran into that, so I had to go through a document storage reconciliation. So we were a 50-year-old site. We had to get rid of 50-year-old documents. It turns out in the early days, it was literally just, throw everything in a box, save everything. It included obsolete bank statements, and we're talking about hundreds of boxes worth of storage of things that were really not relevant to the spirit of document storage. We had to really come come through and do a justification to understand what we need to put into long-term storage. Anything source, we save our source, of course. Anything regulatory. The only real legal thing is the CTA, and the only reason why was the language about document storage and archiving, so we knew that we were being compliant. Everything else from the CTA would be filed in a business file. You don't have to put it in long-term document storage. What's the point? You're literally wasting money. Long-term doc storage is expensive, and that's what we were finding. We reduced our document storage expenditures by 66%.
Wow, that's huge.
There was a trial that was taking up 6 boxes, and we got it down to 2 boxes. And you just multiply that by all of the different trials. And if you are going to stick with paper, just be very efficient and conservative about what you put in your long-term doc storage.
Couldn't agree more.
What are the challenges of our current document storage practices in the clinical research industry?
A lot of it has to do with what we were just talking about, what we're actually storing. Also, the sponsors and CROs being open to the sites being more proactive about their storage. What is the site needing to accommodate the long-term storage, and what can the sponsor do to work with them? As long as they're hitting the requirements, they should be able to utilize different forms of document storage. I'm getting at electronic storage. Even if they're not using electronic source, electronic regulatory, they should still, in the end, think about making their long-term document storage electronic. This takes away so many expenses. You immediately don't have the need for the long-term storage. You can be using a different system, and there's many different systems out there now that you can use to scan your documents and store them. And that's something that Cornerstone is willing to do, actually transition that paper into an electronic storage. And then not only is it stored electronically in this system from now on, but I also recommend you can download all of the data onto a flash drive. And now you essentially have a shoebox full of flash drives versus a million boxes full of paper. That's something that we're really passionate about, helping sites at least get to that point. Because one, then they're getting a little introduced to electronic source and electronic reg, which I love and I'm a huge advocate for. But it's also really taken away all of that burden. A lot of sites don't even realize that they're being charged every time they have to retrieve a document or store a document. A lot of the site staff doesn't realize that and keep track. It's a huge, huge difference. And risk, how long you have to store these documents, years, 10, 15 years. And I just recently learned that European regulations is 25 years. This is a long time for you to track, manage, pay for, and also trust. You have to trust whatever facility that you're storing this with. What happens if your documents are no longer there? Things happen. You're actually taking less risk using technology.
I knew a site, they decided to digitize all of their records. They had their 2-year storage, and then they ran it to long-term storage facility. And then about 10 years later, what happened was they needed to retrieve something from the records. They went to go pull the flash drive, and they found that it was blank. And they're saying, it's supposed to be something on here. What's going on? So then they did a lot of investigation, and many, many interviews later, they found that the person who was delivering their flash drives to long-term storage decided to take shortcuts through the MRI room. And as a result of going through the MRI room, completely demagnetized every flash drive that was sent into long-term storage.
Wow.
So they had a decade of blank USB drives that they were paying for long-term storage, and then they had to clean it up. So flash drives have an age to them. How do you manage long-term storage, like 25 years, on an electronic media that might be gauged for 5 years? Or
decide what the term is that it's good for, and then you need to write it in your SOPs that you're copying over to a new one. I would blanket do this with all of them. If it's 3 years that you feel like it's gonna last, and then you need to do it every 2.5 years. And you just blanket across all of your studies, all of your flash drives. Refresh your storage is probably the better way of saying it. You need to make it part of your SOP.
That's archival maintenance. We need to make sure that we can pay for that, because it's not just like you set it and forget it.
Exactly.
There's money behind that. Devil's advocate, this is an industry where we try to just let the sponsor pay for it and own it. Why don't we just ship everything to the sponsor? Why do sites even have to do this at all?
The PI is responsible for those documents whenever they're needed, and is responsible for maintaining and owning documents.
Could you imagine what kind of an unethical place it could be if sponsors were just given everything and they didn't have that balance of power, PIs ensuring the integrity of the trial that they performed. I could see if someone didn't quite understand the system, they'd look at this on an efficiency level and think to themselves, oh, well, this just makes sense. We'll just get everything to the sponsor in an electronic way. It's less burden on the site. I love that one. And so then everyone's happy except for the ethics.
It's a conflict of interest to have so much data. There has to be that checks and balances of power and visible data.
And this is the PI's neck on the line. And it's up to them to hold on to these records. And if any question whatsoever came up, it's up to that PI or that institution, in the event the PI is no longer there, to sit there and say, yes, we did host this trial. Yes, this was our employee, our PI. They performed this. And we can assure that these data are correct.
Yep. And feeling confident in saying that is huge.
It is absolutely huge, which also means that respecting archiving and doc storage should be a priority. It is not a second thought.
100% agreed.
Because we all know study startup is super rushed. Hurry up, sign this contract, approve this budget, let's go. You get the green light, let's go. We want to enroll. But nobody's thinking about the consequences of the outcomes of the trial, which is document storage. It's the data. How may we improve document storage and archiving in clinical research?
What we can do at the site level is turn to electronic. And if not, if you're very opposed to that, be organized. In research anyways, you should be the most organized as possible. But when it comes to document retention and storage, do not let it be a second thought. This is important. And I think too, a lot of sites at the end of the trial, they think, oh, we're done. Thank goodness. We're done. Here's the documents, but stop. You still have the responsibility to keep this organized all the way to the end. And sites need to remember that. And sites need to be open to improving and advancing, adopting things that make it easier for them, as well as focusing on how much they're spending on this and what they're getting in return. Sites also spend a lot of time on their patients. That's what's important to the site level. Thankfully, the budget is not the first thing on their mind. It is their patients and the treatment and what they're bringing to their community. Having support systems from different vendors that can help them bridge that gap and make sure they're getting the most out of what they're doing.
If I were a site and I was on paper for 30 years and I'm starting to get that itch, I'm starting to think to myself, I think I want to be innovative. This is really costing me a lot. I just got my Iron Mountain bill and I had a heart attack. And I'm like, hey, Nicole, you started Cornerstone. I heard that you're really, really good at this. I heard that you can help sites go through this process. What would be your advice to sites who are starting to get interested in innovating into electronic document storage?
Start researching, spending a little time and looking at different options of systems to use. Viva Vault is a great place to start for sites. It's free to sites. It's a perfect introduction. It's what some of my clients have used. And even if you don't want to use Viva Vault, there are several other great systems as well. Do your research, do a couple demos, see how it works, and start making small changes. Once you decide that you are going to use a system, I would say starting with long-term storage is the perfect way to start. Start with one small study. Call us for support. It takes a lot of time to scan documents and upload and organize into these systems, and we're happy to help you transition to that because it will make a huge difference in the end.
I agree. I have seen personally the effect of transferring long-term doc storage here in 2024, where we kind of have things figured out.
Yep.
It would help our sites to get onto this electronic system.
Agreed.
If I were to hand you the microphone right now and I said, what would you like to tell the entire industry about archiving and document storage and how we could make it better for everyone? What would you tell them?
Be open to innovative change. Be aware of what you're already contractually agreed to. Be willing to work with each other from all ends. To sponsors and to sites alike, be open and willing to work with systems from either side. Don't let document storage be your second thought.
Be open, be considerate of new and innovative ways to do things compliantly, the right way. Be conscious of the obligations that you as sites have to have anyway. And importantly, be understanding of not only the sites and their obligations, but also the considerations of the sponsors who have to be responsible to file to the FDA based off of the data that we as sites have to store for such a long time. And if we do that together, we can think about each other, we can be conscious, we can know our obligations, we can work together so that we can innovate and improve how we as sites store documents for the long run.
Yep, I agree.
Nicole, thank you so much for coming on to CRP and Central. It was a joy talking about document storage and archiving with you, and I look forward to sharing this with the audience.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fox. I really appreciate being here, and I'm honored to be on your podcast.
All right, well, stay tuned. We'll see you for the live event. I'll talk to you later.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Anna has extensive record retention experience in paper, electronic, and destruction situations. Now, at One Oak, she brings her quality and expertise to empower physicians with the support that they need to be successful PIs. Document storage times may range from regulatory requirements to contracted timelines, ranging from 15 to 25 years, and in rare cases, the lifetime of the site. Sponsors really do contact sites to retrieve data, and it is critical to have organized lists for retrievable records. Archiving takes a ton of time to maintain, space to hold, and it encounters challenges with degrading media and uncertainty in vendor existence for the duration of storage requirements. And although sites are required to store records for a long-term contracted period, they are often ignored by sponsors or cannot find the proper contact when a study's records are due for destruction, and they have no way of asking for additional money to pay for extended storage time. And if we really apply value to document storage during negotiations, convene as research sites and agree upon industry-level standards, #sites have rights, and talk to each other to share best practices and understand needs, we may have a chance at improving document storage for literally generations to come. Nicole has many years of experience in clinical research in site and leadership roles. She now brings a dedication to quality to the industry process improvements at Cornerstone Research Services. Document storage is a necessary evil in the industry, and it must comply to FDA, ICH, and contractual requirements for safe, secure, and retrievable records. Sponsors really do call sites years later to retrieve and provide documents, and this process can take substantial space, time, money, and disrupted processes if sites do not maintain hyper-organized systems. Document storage is often a second thought for sites, sponsors, and CROs during the rush of study startup and budget negotiations. For optimal processes, sites should consider why we store these records and what exactly must be stored. They should also do their homework, be proactive, build strong archival management processes, take steps to consolidate and efficiently use paper storage, and transition to electronic long-term document storage when possible. If we stay organized, stay open to improvements, and become aware and conscious of each stakeholder's needs, we have an opportunity to improve safe, secure, and compliant document storage for the ages. Both of today's guests confirmed the value of electronic systems, the importance and the regulatory and contractual obligations document storage applies to our sites, the extensive costs and efforts of appropriate archival management, and the critical importance of maintaining organized processes. And while Anna suggests sites come together to discuss, share, and create site-level industry standards for document storage, Nicole gives similar advice with industry-wide collaborations, open-minded innovations, and an understanding for each other. So, how may we improve record retention for improved clinical trial quality and overall results? Combined, Anna and Nicole agreed upon distinct principles and best practices. To improve record retention, we must focus closely on community, prioritization, and organization. Talk about the needs of document storage with your collaborators and understand the efforts required. Don't make document storage a second thought, and responsibly apply the appropriate values, and diligently maintain the organized processes and systems at all times to ensure your archiving, record retention, and document storage are safe, secure, and retrievable for decades and decades and decades to come. Thank you for tuning into today's exciting podcast episode 29, Record Retention. Document storage is a long haul, and it is a torch that is handed down from one generation of professionals to another. Remember to respect the data that we hold, the sole reason we are in this industry. Thank you to Anna and Nicole for taking the time to speak with us today. Thank you to today's CRPN Short Voice volunteers. Finally, thank you to my sponsors for making this podcast possible. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you next time on CRPN Central.